بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسوله الكريم وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Jazakallah khair everyone for joining us. Today inshallah we will be going through in as much detail as time permits inshallah the different aspects that pertain to zakat and how it is applicable in each of our lives. Zakat, as we all know, is one of the pillars of our deen, and it is just as important to discharge as is our salat and as is our siyam. The problem arises that salat is something that we do every day, but zakat is just once a month, once a year, right? Even fasting, it's multiple times in a year. Right, you could do it nafil fast in Ramadan, you fast for 30 days, but zakat is just once in the whole year. Because of that, sometimes it's not seen to be up there with those main pillars of deen that we have. But nonetheless, it is just as important to learn about salat as it is to learn about our zakat. And today, inshallah, we're going to be looking over a few different modules. We'll have a brief intro about zakat and a little bit about who is zakat obligatory on. The main discussion, the most lengthiest part, is about how to calculate zakat on different types of assets. We will go through as many assets as we can, and if anyone has questions about any ones that we have not counted, not gone over, they can ask about those inshallah. And the last section will be about who can we give our wealth of zakat to, who are those that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made eligible to receive our zakat. Zakat, the word zakat in the lexical sense, it means purity, it means increase, it means truthfulness. Purity because it purifies our wealth. Increase because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promises us that those who pay their zakat, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make that a means of increase in our wealth. And truthfulness because zakat is a matter that only those who are true to their faith, they pay their zakat. Because it is very easy for someone to say that I've already paid my zakat, right? I think keep that one on. Yeah. Right? It's easy for someone to say that they have paid their zakat when in reality they have not. No one can truly verify if each individual person has paid their zakat. It goes back to the truthfulness that a person has to their faith to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In the lexical sense, zakat is about, as we all know, to pay a portion of our wealth if we are eligible from those who have to give zakat, to give it to those who are eligible to receive zakat. Right? And that is all what it comes down to at the end. Zakat was made obligatory in the second year after Hijrah, in the same year when the fasting of Ramadan was made obligatory. And zakat falls under those monetary obligations in the Sharia that have to do only with wealth. Right? You have physical ibadat like salat, hajj. Hajj is one of those that is mixed. You have physical and monetary in hajj. And then you have siyam, which is physical. Zakat is one of those aspects of Sharia which deal only with our wealth. And it's important to understand that zakat is a blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He has given us. And the main reason because many times we acquire wealth not from a necessarily haram means, but often in our dealings there is something that is wrong that we are doing. Right? Sometimes we're not completely honest and truthful in our dealings. We're not fair to someone. Small things, right? Sometimes we do in our dealings. Because of that, there are these impurities in all of our wealth. Everyone is guilty of that. Zakat is a means Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us to remove that filth from our wealth. And the importance of that is that we all know of a concept called barakah, right? Blessing. Blessings, barakah, what it means is to be able to do more with less. To be able to do more with less. And what happens when someone does not have barakah in their wealth, because of that impurities that are there in that wealth, their money gets spent very easily. They don't realize that, one day I had this much money, Now it's only been a few days, a few weeks, and it's all gone. But where did it go? Right? We see that happening. Where did that money go? I didn't make any major expense, but that is a sign where we see money going quickly, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has removed the barakah from our wealth. So paying the zakat, that is a way of one of the ways of purifying that wealth, so that we become not those whose money finishes very quickly, wealth finishes very quickly, but those who are able to do a lot more with a lot less. Right? Very often you see people who have salaries that aren't as high as people who are making 6 figures or 7 figures, but they're doing a lot more in their life. Right? They have more. They have maybe sometimes even better, commodities, house or car, than those who are making way more. Right? That is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala putting barakah in their wealth, in their living, where they're able to do more with less. Right? And zakat, of course, is not a tax, right? Unless someone has seen a country or a government where tax is paid on 2.5% only. Has anyone seen a place like that? Right? It's always in the places where there's very low taxes, it's 6, 7, 8%. And that is on your earnings. That is on your earnings. Zakat is 2.5% on your savings. Right? It doesn't even compare to that. Many ahadith and ayat of the Quran talk about zakat. Some ahadith we have in front of you here. Zakat, Aisha anha, she narrates the hadith that zakat is never intermingled, mixed with any amount of wealth except that it destroys it. Right? The second section, the verse of the Quran, that indeed those who recite the book of Allah and establish prayer and spend out of what we have provided them, secretly and publicly, can expect a profit that will never perish. The last one says that that which you give in zakat, seeking Allah's pleasure, then those that shall receive their wealth increased and multiplied. Right? So these are just 3 small examples. There are numerous ahadith and ayat of the Quran that talk about the importance of zakat. Who is zakat fard on? Zakat as a whole, right, before we look at whether you have enough wealth to pay zakat, as a whole, someone who is an adult, baligh, Islamically speaking, someone who is mature, someone who is a Muslim, and someone who is sane. Anyone doesn't fulfill any of these conditions, zakat is not due on them. Now, when it comes to the wealth of a child, the 3 other imams besides Imam Abu Hanifa say that zakat is due on a child's wealth as well. And Imam Abu Hanifa, in his school, he says that if a child has wealth, it is strongly recommended for the parents to pay zakat on behalf of that child. So practically speaking, almost everyone agrees that if the child has wealth, zakat should be paid on that wealth as well. Now, moving on to the main section about how to calculate zakat. How do we determine if we have to give zakat, and how much do we give from different types of assets? Right? You have in front of you here 12 different types of various assets that many of them have their own ways of calculating zakat. Right? It's not all very simple and straightforward that you just take 2.5% and you give zakat. As you will see, there are many different aspects that we need to look at. Now, zakat is paid once per year, once per lunar year. Okay? And the zakat date, a person's zakat date, that is very important, that a person know when their zakat date is. Now, technically speaking, a person's zakat date is when they first had enough wealth on which zakat was due in savings. Right? And that is what we call the nisab. Nisab is the threshold, the minimum amount of wealth that you have to have in about cash and currencies of that type, for which zakat would be due. So if it is a child who for the first time they have that amount, they will see, let's say if they never had any wealth of their own and they started working now and they got their first paycheck, right? That's the first day now when they had that amount of wealth. Technically for a child it's all savings. They don't have any expenses like adults do, right? Generally. So from there a person would see 1 year from that time, if you still have wealth above the nisab, you will pay zakat on that, 2.5% of that. right? And we'll look at some examples here. So in this case, this person, and important thing, when you don't know when you first had nisab, right? Most people don't know. Then you just need to choose, because zakat is due once a year anyways, you choose one date throughout the year, a lunar date, and you stick with that, make that your date for the rest of your life. Most people choose a date in Ramadan. It's not necessary, but because the reward is so much more in Ramadan for everything, so some people choose one of the last odd nights in the last 10 days. Some people choose the first of Ramadan, some do the last day. It's up to you. It's up to you, choose whatever day. And that will become your date, and you stick with that for the rest of your life. And it is important to know that date, because when you do your calculations, you look at your assets on that date specifically, right? So in this example, when this person had $800 in Ramadan for the first time, let's say, and through the year it went up and down. Let's say the nisab was $400, right? And we'll talk about how much it actually is. And they even dipped below nisab during the year, but at the end, they ended above nisab. This person now will have to pay zakat on this amount here, which looks like about $900, right? It's not that, Amar, can we maybe adjust this a bit, make it a bit more clear for the brothers? Right, so it's about what amount you have at the end of the year. And the year is not January to December, right? It's about when you first had wealth. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think that's a lot better. Yeah. So, like I said, we look at how much a person has on that end of the year, right? This is called the zakat year, right? So when you first had wealth, forget about when you first had it, right? Because most people, they're just living year to year, they have that wealth, they have that amount in savings, right? So you're just going to look at that date. Now, every year when that date comes, do you have wealth equal or above the nisab? And that amount you have to see after taking out any deductions. We're going to talk about what those deductions are, what you could take out, what you can't, right? So in this case, this person ended at $900. They're going to pay 2.5% of that for their zakat, right? But if they had deductions, again, we're going to talk about that, of, let's say, $600, and because of that, you deduct 600 from 900 is 300, that would be below nisab, they would not pay zakat, right? And we're going to see what deductions are. The only exception to this rule is if during the year you lose all your wealth, you go into debt. If you go into debt, your zakat year is cancelled. Now when you gain money again, it's going to start again. So in this case, this person again started at 800. Here then the nisab was at 500 with that line, up and down, and this is the zero line, right? So at this point here, this person dropped below zero. Looks like in Jumad al-Ula, around there. When that happened, they have no savings now, they're in debt. Their zakat year is cancelled. When they come back above nisab now, which looks like it happens here about midway through Rajab, this is going to be a new start date for their zakat year. Now 1 year from this, if this person still has nisab and they didn't lose all their money during the year, When that date comes next year, they will pay zakat. So no zakat is going to be due at the end here, right? Instead, over here, the year will restart. You're going to look 1 year from now what the condition is. Right? Does that make sense? Okay. Now, what is the nisab? Nisab is based off of gold and silver. However, you only use the nisab of gold if you only have gold. You don't have any cash. You don't have any other savings in the bank. You don't have any investments. You don't have a business, anything like that. If you only have gold, right, which is sometimes the case for some sisters, then you take the nisab of gold. The nisab of gold is 87.48 grams. You need to see based on the place where someone is, what is the value of that. It's usually around between $4,000 to $6,000. Right? So if you have gold that weighs more than 87.48 grams, then you will owe 2.5% of that value in zakat. Okay, so let's say a person's gold weighed 10,000, weighed a certain number of grams whose value was $10,000. Right? Now they have to pay zakat. They will pay 200. They will owe $250 as zakat. That is 2.5% of 10,000. The nisab of silver, if you have cash, only cash, or you have mixed assets, you have cash and gold, you have cash, gold, silver, investments, this, that, business, then you use the nisab of silver. Okay? So again, you only use this nisab of gold if you only have gold. If you have anything else, you're going to use the nisab of silver. Nisab of silver is 612 grams. According to some scholars, it's 595 grams. This is the more cautious route to take, and that is something to keep in mind in zakat, that whenever we are unsure of something, we always take the cautious route, which makes us have to pay more, okay, if we can, depending on our situation. Because if we pay more in zakat, and we didn't actually owe that much, it's just going to count as sadaqah. You still get the reward for it. But if it's less, now you're missing an amount in your zakat. It has not been fully discharged. Right? Especially when there's very small differences, like this is like, 12, 13 grams, it's going to be like a $15, $20 difference. Something like that, you take the amount where you're paying more in zakat. So, when you have the mixed assets then, you're going to take the value of everything together, let's say it's cash, gold, silver, and you're going to pay 2.5, you're going to see if it's above the nisab. Now this nisab of silver, it is around $500 to $600. Okay, that's how much it comes out to. The price of gold in Canada, last time I checked, it was around 90 something cents of silver, 90 something cents per gram. And it goes up and down. Some time ago it was $1, so it varies. But we see what the worth is of this in grams, and if we have savings above that, then we pay zakat on that. Stones and gems are not zakatable. Okay, zakatable is a term that means you owe zakat on it. Stones and gems, you don't pay zakat on. So if someone has a ring or something that has a diamond in it, you pay, let's say if the band is made of gold, you pay zakat on the value of the gold, not of the diamond, of the stones. Okay, same thing for all other stones. If the ring is made of like platinum or something, there's no zakat on that. Only gold and silver. Right? Yes? Yeah, so if the ring has say, silver and a diamond, then you'd have to find out what is the value of the silver in that ring, and you pay zakat on that only. Not on the diamond. No. Okay. And for cash, for the purpose of cash, we use the nisab of silver. Okay, so if most people have just cash, right? And cash could mean physical cash or in the bank, same thing. That you have money, you use the nisab of silver. If you have more than the nisab, $500-600 in savings, right? You can subtract all the money that you need for your day-to-day expenses, and we'll talk about that. If after everything you have more than nisab, then you will pay 2.5% of that in your zakat. Okay. Quick practice example. Usually I'm making the people do this in the workshop. We'll just look at the solution together. And we're going to have about five, six of these throughout, inshallah. So this person has 2,400 cash in the bank, 2,100 at home. The value of the gold, they got evaluated from a jeweler, it was $1,100, and the silver was $350. This is a very simple scenario. Just combine them all, 59.50, and you pay 2.5% of zakat, 148.75. Right? Pretty straightforward. Okay, deductibles. In zakat, you are allowed to deduct amounts of money that are owing on you. Okay, so this could be a previous expense, right? It could be an overdue parking ticket, overdue speeding ticket. It could be some bills that you haven't paid, right? You owe someone money for something. As long as you intend to pay it back within the next 12 months, you could deduct that from your zakat, your zakatable wealth. As well as if you are paying off a long-term loan, like a mortgage or a car finance, not a car lease. Okay, a car lease, it doesn't play into zakat at all, you're renting the car. And a car finance or a student loan, something, a long-term loan you're paying off. Maybe you bought some, expensive camera or device from Best Buy and you're paying it off monthly or something, So the next 12 months of payments, the capital amounts only, right? We're not getting into interest, its impermissibility, but interest amounts cannot be used as a deductible. Sharia doesn't recognize that wealth. It doesn't play into it at all. The capital amounts you're paying back over the next 12 months can be deducted. Okay? So, an example, let's say I have $10,000 at home, or I have $10,000, and my zakat date comes, but I owe someone, I borrowed $3,000 from a friend some time ago, and I need to pay him back pretty soon, right? And I have a car finance, right? Let's say it's on 0% car finance, no interest, and I'm paying, in the whole year I pay $6,000, let's say, right? So now, from $10,000, I can deduct the $3,000 that I owe my friend. I can deduct $6,000 of the car payments. That leaves me only with $1,000. I'm going to pay zakat 2.5% of the $1,000. That's it. Okay, so you deduct the money that you owe from your total zakatable assets. But, very important, you cannot deduct future expenses. You cannot deduct future expenses. Rent you're going to pay. If you have amassed large amounts of wealth to pay a down payment that you're going to pay. I got a call about this just today. That, me and my husband, we've gathered this amount of wealth for a down payment, and we're looking to get a house in the next few months. Do you have to pay zakat on that? Yes, you do, right? Because it's a future payment. Zakat is only deducted. Zakatable wealth is only affected by deductions for previous expenses, amounts that are already owing on you, right? And you can also deduct your current month's expenses. Okay? Any expenses you have on a month-to-month basis, that could be your rent of this month. It could be your phone bill, your internet bill, your utilities, anything that you pay on a monthly basis, that month worth of expense. Because remember, zakat, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala never asks us to pay zakat on wealth that we need for our expenses. Right? It's on the excess wealth always. So we deduct what our expenses are for this month because we need that money for those expenses. Right? And then what's left after that, we see if we have above nisab still, and we pay 2.5% of that. Loans. So loans are of two types. One is, the first one isn't really a loan, but it's money that is owed to you, but not because you gave money. Money that is owed to you, but not because you gave money to someone. For example, you have some examples here. Your employer owes you your wages. Rental income that is your tenant hasn't paid their rent yet, right? If you're a woman, you haven't received your dowry yet. Or there's an inheritance that you're going to receive soon, you haven't received it yet. So money that is owed to you, but you not because you gave something first, zakat is not due on that. Okay, it never came into your possession, you don't really have it yet. When it's an actual loan, when you gave money to someone or somewhere, and now that person or that organization or something owes it back to you, you are still the owner of that wealth. You've lent it to someone else, you have to pay zakat on that. Okay, but sometimes if it's a large amount, right, you may not have other liquid assets to pay that zakat from. So it's up to you. If you want to pay it every year, if it's a long-term loan, every year you could pay the zakat on it, or you're allowed to wait, defer it, until when you get paid back the loan, then you have to backdate and pay zakat for each year from that wealth. Okay, it's up to you what you want to do. If you gave someone money and that person has disappeared, right? You're trying to ask them that give me my money back, pay me back, and they're not paying it, and you've lost hope, you don't think that you're ever going to get it back, don't pay zakat on it. Wait, if he gives it back to you, then you have to backdate and pay zakat. But if when you lost hope that this person is not going to pay me, and usually what happens is you say, you know what, okay, fine, for the sake of Allah, I'll make a sadaqah for him. He's not going to give it back to me, I might as well make that my intention and get some reward out of it. I'm not going to get the money back, right? If you did that, then down the road, sometimes this person pays you back, now you don't owe zakat on the previous years. Right? Because in your mind, now you gave him that wealth as sadaqah. So you don't owe zakat on it. If he gives it back to you, now he's technically gifting you the money back. Then from there onwards, you will add it to your wealth and go on and see if you need to pay zakat on that based on your other calculations. Okay, another practice problem. Let's look at this one. So a person has cash in the bank, at home, gold value, silver value, monthly car finance. We're going to assume this is capital only, no interest. A loan that you gave to the masjid, and you want to pay zakat on it now, you don't want to defer it. And a loan that is owed to a friend that you're going to pay back within the next 12 months. Okay, before we look at the answer, just think a bit of what would be a deductible here, what do we pay zakat on, what do we not pay zakat on. See if anything stands out to you. Right, is there something here that could be a deductible? Car finance? Anything else? What about these loans? Anything in here that we could use as a deductible? Remember, anything that you owe, you can deduct. Right? So this loan owed, we can also deduct. Okay? So let's look at the solution. So when you do your zakat calculations, you always want to gather first your gross assets, then the deductibles, and subtract that out. So we're going to add the cash, the gold, the silver. We're going to add the loan amount. We said we want to pay zakat on it now, right? And that total is our gross assets of 15,600. We're going to then look at our deductibles, which is the car finance, but times 12, right? Don't forget that. 12 months worth you can deduct. And the loan that you owe, your total deductibles are 4,600. That leaves you with 11,000. You'll pay 2.5% of 11,000, $275. Okay, does that make sense? First you gather your total assets, then your deductibles, subtract it, and 2.5%. Yes, the loan you gave, you pay zakat on. If you want, you could, like we said, you could defer it until when you get the loan back and then pay it, or you can pay it every year. Okay, another one. Let's just look at the solution. So cash in the bank, at home, gold, silver, add them all up, right? And the loan you gave to the masjid, add that up as well. Here's 10,000. You get your gross assets. Deductibles, where we have a mortgage here, and this is the capital amount only, 1,700 times 12. 12 months worth of payments. And that's it for your deductibles, 20,400. The lost cash, you don't pay zakat on. Right? Because like we said, same thing when you're given a loan and you don't expect to ever get it back. When you lose something, it's the same thing. You don't expect you're ever going to find it. It's gone, it's lost. So you don't pay zakat on it now. If you find it one day, then you're going to backdate it and pay zakat on that. Okay. And remember, at the end of all our calculations, we always take 2.5%, right? That is the minimum. That is the minimum. That's like in Salat, we just pray our fard, right? That's the obligatory amount. If a person has the means, has the ability, then they should give more. Right? There's no maximum. You want to give 3%, 5%, 10% of your savings, right? It's better always to give a little bit more. Okay, in a business, if you have a business, you might have to pay some zakat on some things of your business, right? So if you have a business that sells merchandise, products, you have to pay zakat on the total value of your merchandise that is ready to sell. Okay, that someone can walk in and buy it. If you have a store, for example, and you have stuff in the back, technically that's also for sale. Someone says, I want all of it, you're going to give them all of it. Right? So your total value of your merchandise, you have to pay zakat on that. If you have sold merchandise and the person hasn't paid you back yet, paid you for it yet, you pay zakat on that money that he owes you. Because that money that the person owes you is in place of a zakatable asset, which was the business merchandise. So you pay zakat on that as well. Okay? And of course, any cash that the business has, or cash that you gave as a loan, same thing as in personal wealth. If you gave a loan, and you can pay zakat on it now, or you can defer it and pay it afterwards. What you won't pay zakat on in a business is if you provide a service in your business. You don't sell a product, you provide a service. A service is not zakatable. There's no zakat on that. Because of that, if it's a service receivable, meaning someone owes you wealth because of a service you provided, there's no zakat on that either. And any tools, equipment, property, cars, anything you need to run your business, there's no zakat on that. Okay, it could be like a cash register, it could be shelving units, it could be anything, depending on the business. There's no zakat on that. Anything you need to run your business. Okay, and the same thing, as personally you have deductibles, you can have deductibles in your business, right? You owe money to your supplier, to someone, to another partner, another collaborator, anything, overdue bills. Just like in your personal money, overdue expenses you can deduct. In a business, you can deduct any overdue amounts on the business as well, any owing amounts. Okay, I'll jump over that. Properties. When it comes to properties, zakat is not due on any types of properties unless you are in the business of buying and selling properties. That's what you do. Now in this case, the property is your merchandise. That's what you buy and you sell at a profit. So zakat is due on the value of that property when your zakat date comes. Okay, any other case, rental property, if it's rented out, there's no zakat on the property. The rent that you earned from there is going to be added to your wealth. And when your zakat date comes, you do your calculations. If you've spent it, there's no zakat on it then. If you still have it, you're above nisab and so on, then you'll pay zakat. There must be a clear intention that I bought this to resell and I'm going to sell it, that then zakat is due. Right? So if you bought a property to flip and sell, and your zakat date comes, right? Now you need to see that property in that condition, maybe you haven't worked on it yet and fixed it up. In that condition, what it's worth, you pay zakat on that. Right? If it's already done, it's up for sale. When your zakat date comes, whatever the selling price you have posted, that's what you pay your zakat on. Question? Okay. Yeah. Sorry, say that again? No, on the full amount. On the full amount. So when the property is, let's say it's done, ready, up for sale, right? Whatever the selling price is, that's what you pay zakat on. On the full value of the property, not just the gains. Right? Yeah, I mean, it ends up being quite a bit, but it still works because the profit is still that much more in buying and selling properties. And 600,000, yeah, right. It's if it's for sale and your zakat date comes. If you sold it before that, then that money is yours now. Now it just depends when your zakat date comes. Do you still have that money or not? Right? Maybe you bought something else, or you spent it something, and there's no zakat on. Only if think of it as a business with merchandise, right? If you have that available to sell and your zakat date comes, and just like you would pay zakat on a merchandise that's like, $20, you're going to pay zakat on a merchandise that's $200,000, not 200,000. We live in BC, $2 million. Okay? Yeah, if you sold your own property, then that money is part of your personal assets. Now you just see when your zakat date comes. If you still have all that money, then you're going to pay zakat on it, right? But if by then you've bought a new home, you put the money in that, then you don't owe any zakat. Yes. Yeah, if you're not sure, you bought a land, maybe the price will go up. I'm going to sell it. Maybe it won't. I don't know. Let's see. There's no zakat on that. Right? It needs to be clear cut that this is what I do. I buy and sell properties. I bought this property to sell it. Right? It needs to be clear that this is your business. These houses, these properties are your merchandise. Right? Yes. No, if you have your own property and you buy a second one to rent out, there's no zakat on that. Likewise, if you own multiple residential properties, sometimes you live here, sometimes you live there, no matter how many you own, there's no zakat on any of those. Even on the rent, no. The rent is going to be added to your personal money, and then when your date comes, you see what you have. If you pay zakat, then you pay zakat. If not, then not. Yeah. Yeah. So if you own a part of a company, you pay zakat based on your percentage of ownership. Yeah, merchandise, the cash of the business, anything, right? Let's say the total zakatable assets of the company are $100,000. That includes the merchandise, includes the cash they have, the trade receivable, anything like that. And you own 50%. You'll pay zakat on 50,000, not on 100,000. Merchandise is selling price. if it's up for sale. If it's up for sale. If it's not yet, it's in the process, and this is the slide that I skipped over, but if it's in the process of being prepared, then whatever the individual parts of it are worth at that time, which will be less, you'll pay zakat on that. So for example, if someone has a restaurant, right, the value of a cooked meal is more than the value of individual ingredients, right? But they will calculate zakat on the value of all the ingredients that they have, right? Likewise, someone is a carpenter, for example, and not a carpenter, someone who sells planks of wood and they sell finished products made of wood, right? So the finished products are going to be worth a lot more than the individual planks, even if you use the same amount. But so for the finished products, they'll pay zakat on that value. For the planks of wood, they'll pay zakat on what those are worth. Yes, yeah, ingredients, whatever they're worth, in that condition. Yes. Rental property is looked at as an employment, where just as you're paid your salary every month, you are paid the rent of this property every month, right? Because there's no actual buying and selling happening, so we don't look at it as a business. So that's why there's no zakat on the property itself, right? Even if you were to look at it as a business, remember anything that you need to run your business, there's no zakat on. So in this case, you need that property to earn that rent. So either way, there's no zakat on the property. Right? So rental property, the taxes, it depends when your zakat date is. When that date comes and your property tax bill has already come and you owe it now, you can deduct that, right? But if it hasn't come, it's going to come in like 6 months from now, and your zakat date is here, then you can't deduct it. Okay, practice problem, a little more complicated. Here a person has cash, gold and silver, business merchandise, monthly rental income, monthly mortgage, capital amount, loan given to Masood. Again, we're going to say the person wants to pay zakat now. They don't want to defer it. Overdue invoices. Your business has overdue invoices. Trades receivable, meaning you sold merchandise in your business and money is owed to you for that. And services receivable, where you provided a service and money is owed to you for that. So what happens here? First, we always combine our gross assets, our gross zakatable assets. So that's the cash, always, gold, silver, business merchandise, the loan that you gave, that's still your money, and the trades receivable. Right? We said you pay zakat on trades receivable, where you sold a merchandise, a physical thing, and someone owes you money for that. You combine all the ones in light green, right? You can tell there. So it's 81,600. Monthly rental income doesn't come into the calculation, because that's like your paycheck, right? Yes, the money is going to come. Technically, this has already been added in the personal cash. So you don't count this again, right? Remove it. Services receivable, they're not zakatable. Someone owes you money for a service you did, you don't pay zakat on that. So remove that as well. Okay? Then, your deductibles. Your mortgage, 3,000 times 12. And your overdue invoices in your business. You combine those, 41,400, subtract it, 2.5%, $1,005. Okay? It always helps when you're doing your own calculations, write everything down that you have. Then you see, okay, what from here is zakatable, what is not, remove that, what is a deductible. This one? This one? It's the rental income. Yeah. Yeah, rental property. It's not zakatable, no. right? Because it's already been added in your personal cash. Yeah, like your wages. So you're not going to count it twice, right? Just the one. Okay.
Before I calculate the gold, if itself is not like nisab, then I don't have to pay zakat on that.
Well, if someone only has gold and it's not equal to the nisab, then yes, you don't pay zakat. Nisab of gold, right? Which is quite a bit. If you have gold and others, then you gotta combine it then. Yeah, yeah. Even if a bunch of individual assets on their own are below nisab, but when you combine them, they're above, then you're gonna pay zakat on them. Okay, pension funds. Now, I didn't talk about stock investments, like you should buy shares in the stock market. So, briefly, if you are a short-term trader, where you buy and sell on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, you pay zakat on the full amount of your investment portfolio. Okay? Because that's your merchandise now. You're buying and selling it. If you're a long-term trader, where you buy stocks and you hold them for years, right? One day you're going to sell them. Then there's a few different ways to calculate it. There's one formula that gets a bit complicated. I won't give you that one. The most accurate way is to go and get the finances of each company's stock that you own and put yourself, like the question you asked, that if you own a part of a company, right? If you buy stocks in a company, you own part of that company. It might be 0.00001%, but you own that amount of the company, right? So you treat yourself, okay, this is my company. How much zakat do I owe on it based on the finances? Let's say it's a multi-million-dollar company, and the zakatable assets, right? You combine its cash, you combine its trade receivable, its merchandise, and then you deduct its liabilities, and you come up with $5 million. That's what it's left with. Now, I own 0.00001% of that. So you see how much that's going to be, right? Maybe it's $50,000, maybe it's $5,000. I don't know. It's going to be something with a 5. Let's say it's $5,000. Pay 2.5% of that. And do that for each company's stock that you own. This is the most difficult way, it's the longest way, but it's the most accurate. The easiest way is you use something called a proxy. A proxy, this is a percentage that the National Zakat Foundation, I'll talk about them a bit later, I work with them as well. Every year they do an assessment of all the companies in the S&P 500 and in the top, I forget how many, in the TSX, in the Toronto Stock Exchange. And they see, on average, how many assets of the companies are zakatable. Right? And they get an average, and then they add some more to that as a cushion, and they give the proxy amount. The proxy amount is usually about 30%. Okay, it varies. Every year they do a new assessment. They haven't done one for this year yet. But last year it was 30, before that it was 27, before that it was 30. It's always around 30%, right? You will end up paying more zakat this way, that's for sure, because they've added a cushion to make sure that the average works for everyone, right? If you want to be certain you pay only the exact amount you owe, then go do the exact calculations. Otherwise you can use the proxy of 30%. Just take the total amount of your investment portfolio, let's say it's $10,000. That's how much your stocks are worth on your zakat date. It's all about the zakat date. Take 30% of that, which is $3,000, and then pay 2.5% of that. You're not paying 30% in zakat. Right? 30% of that is zakatable. Okay, that makes sense? Take $10,000 in this example, $10,000. You take 30%, use the proxy, and you pay 2.5% of the 30%. Okay. Pension funds. This is specifically for RSPs. The same applies almost to all pension funds. It could be an RESP, it could be there's so many abbreviations, it could be any of them, right? Sometimes there are ones that are completely unique. Then you can ask about those if you have something like that. But generally, it will fall under this breakdown. Now you can see it to some extent. So you need to see if there are a few different variables that play into this, right? The first one is what funds are making up that pool of wealth? Where is that coming from? So is it your own contributions that you're putting in there? Is it the employer which is putting funds in for you? Or is it funds that your employer deducts from your paycheck automatically? If it's amounts that come from your employer, and we treat what your employer adds in and what they deduct automatically from your check as the same thing from your employer, you have to see if that is vested. Meaning, do you actually own that? If you were to change companies, go somewhere else tomorrow, do those funds move with you? If they do, then it's vested, you will include those funds in the calculations. If it's not yours, the company owns it, you don't look at that wealth. So you take the vested portion of the employer's contributions plus your own personal contributions, if any. That is your pool of funds that you're working with. Next thing you have to see is, do you have access to that wealth or not? Some pension funds are completely locked. You can't touch them until you retire. Some you do have the choice to access them, but you have to pay hefty penalties and taxes on them. If you don't have access, we're on the left side here. You need to see next, what type of account are those funds sitting in? Where is that money? What's happening with it? If it's just sitting in an account and money is being added to it every month and you're going to take it when you retire, then there's no zakat is due on that. Okay, you don't have access to it. It won't be treated like your wealth, and it's just sitting there. No zakat. The second one is if you have no access but the funds are invested. Okay, companies often do that to make it grow. If it's invested, then there's three opinions. Okay, one is that there's still no zakat due because you still don't have access to it. If you want to withdraw it today, you can't. A second opinion says that you should pay zakat on the full amount because it's invested and you're benefiting from that. So you should pay zakat on the full amount. The middle opinion, this is the one that I usually advise of the most, is you pay zakat on the increase that has taken place through the investment. Because that's what you actually benefited from. If it decreases, then don't pay. Don't deduct. No, don't deduct. Right? So, yeah. No, but at that point, on that date, where does it stand? For example, let's say with the pool of fund from your employer's contributions or yours, whatever, it's at this point over the months, it's come to $10,000, right? That's how much has actually been put in. But right now, your portfolio stands at 15,000, right? You find out, why was that? Where did the extra 5,000 come from? Well, the company invested it somewhere, and those stocks went up. So you got 5,000 more. So pays the zakat on that 5,000. Only the increase, yeah. You don't have access, no. Yeah. No, so if that's the case, where if you leave the company, you're going to lose it, you don't pay zakat on it. It's not yours. It's not yours until the company gives it to you. But in many cases, the funds, they move with you. Right? Usually what happens, if it's a fund that's specific to that company, then you lose it. Right? But if the company is investing in a government RSP on your behalf, then that's going to stick with you wherever you go. Right? So it depends. A lot of variables at play here. Right? Type of account, where the money comes from, do you have access, not have access, all of that. If you have access to it, then you pay zakat on it. Okay? If it's in savings account, then you pay zakat on the full amount minus the taxes and penalties that would apply if you withdrew that money. Right? It's usually pretty heavy withdrawal taxes, like 30-40%. So that and the penalties, you subtract those and pay zakat on that. If it's RSP, yeah. Right? If it's invested, then you still pay zakat on it. You have access to it. If you want, you could withdraw it, but you use the proxy amount, just like in your personal. If you had investments in stocks, use the proxy amount minus the taxes and penalties that would apply if you withdraw it, and you pay zakat on that. Proxy amount is 30%. 30% of stocks and investments, the average of zakatable assets in companies around the world, or in North America at least. Yes?
So on a RSP that's not accessible, it's vested, but like it's a defined benefit at the end, like when you retire, like you see the gain and the increase, right? So is it possible to defer the zakat amount when you're actually getting that?
Yes, yes. So in this case, right, it says it here, you can't read it, it's too small, right? Or could be deferred until withdrawal. Right? If you have more clarity then of how much it is, but then you have to backdate and pay in that case. Not always. Not always. There's different ones.
So backdate to what date?
When you started gathering wealth in there. Yeah, our ESP is generally not accessible, right? It's in the children. And that goes into the other issue, if there's zakat on the children's wealth. Like we said, according to most, you should still pay it. But if there's no access, then you got to see, is it sitting in savings and no zakat on it, right? If it's being invested, then it's better you pay on the increase that's happening.
I was thinking RSP is just as a cash. I was just doing 2.5% of total. I was doing it wrong.
That's the most cautious way, right? Because pension funds, I'll tell you, is one of the things that there's the most different opinions on in zakat, right? Because it's something new, there's no hadith or something about this, right? Or what to do in there, and it's new types of accounts and everything. So there's a lot of different opinions. The most cautious way is pay on the full amount. Right? If someone could, they have that financial ability situation where they could easily pay it, it won't make a difference to them, then that's the best thing to do, just pay it. Right? Okay. Another practice problem. We're going to try maybe finish before Isha. Let's see. Person has 3 investments, stock ABC, and they have an RRSP, access and savings. And I'll remind you back here, that's down here. So it's the full amount minus taxes and penalties. And we said the penalties are going to be $2,000, no tax in this case. And for the investments, we're going to use the proxy of 30%. No, the 30%, okay, so we have investments here, ABC. For these, you add them up, you get 7,000. You take 30% of that. The proxy is only used for investments, like stock market investments, that type. Yeah. Take 30% and pay 2.5% of that. Yeah, so you use 30%, right? Then the RRSP, we said the penalty was 2,000, so we deduct that, and we're at 5,000 now. Okay. Then we're adding up 30% of the investment ABC, which gives us 2,100, and we're adding 5,000 out of the 7,000 of the RRSP because 2,000 was the penalty. So we add up these 2 points here. 2,100 and 5,000, you get 7,100. You pay 2.5% of that, you're going to pay $177.50 in zakat. Okay, so 30% of investments, stock market investments, 2.5% of 30%. I'll say it again. Someone misunderstood once, and they went, I'm going to pay 30% of my things. No, you're not paying 30%. 2.5% of the 30%. Okay, for investments, stock market investments. Yeah, it's 0.75%. That's what it comes down to, right? And then RRSP, in this case where you have access and savings, you do minus the penalties and taxes. In this case, we said there's no taxes, but there was a $2,000 penalty. We're gonna subtract that. We got 5,000, and yeah, it's $177, right? Yeah. It might change, yeah, but it just generally it's past like 10 years, it's stuck around there, 25 to 30%. Okay, we have another very difficult problem. We'll go over the last part and we'll come back to that if we have time, inshallah. Discharging zakat. Where to pay zakat. Intention is very important in zakat. Okay, intention is important in everything. We do it for the sake of Allah. But you have to have the intention that you are paying zakat when you part with that wealth. Either when you're giving it to the recipient, or you're giving it to someone who's going to give it ahead to a recipient, or you're putting it aside from your wealth to give later in zakat. At that point, you have to have the intention that this wealth is zakat. And the reason why this is so important is if you've given someone a loan and they're not paying it back, you can't say, okay, you know what? I'm going to count that as my zakat. That won't be valid. Yeah.
Before I gave zakat to one guy, he's very poor, he was begging. So just so he doesn't feel that it's all his, I just told him, okay, this is your 100,000 or whatever. It's like that home.
Yeah.
I gave him, but he said I have a debt or something like that. So I said, okay, pay the debt off, the rest of the money. He said, I'm going to do something for the regular income. I can do that. And then make sure you pay me back. In my mind, I know it's zakat. So if he doesn't pay me back, I'm okay with that. But just to keep him in pressure and those things,
Okay.
and definitely he will pay me back.
Okay.
I went to home and I gave him my address, phone number. But he never came back, and I knew that he might do that. So it's completely okay. But I did check.
Yeah, that's interesting. I never heard that before. You give it, and your intention is zakat, but you tell him you gotta pay me back. Just so, yeah.
Even if he would come back and I would say, no, that's okay.
Yeah.
It's all yours.
Yeah, that's okay. 'Cause your intention was zakat. Yeah, that's a good one. But you don't have to tell someone that your wealth is zakat. Right? You can say it's a gift, it's something, that's fine. You can say it's sadaqah. Because some people, they feel shy from taking zakat. Right? So you don't have to tell them it's zakat. Your intention is what matters. Who can receive zakat? In the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala outlines a type of people. إِنَّمَا الصَّدَقَاتُ لِلْفُقَرَاءِ وَالْمَسَاكِينِ وَالْعَامِلِينَ عَلَيْهَا, and so on till the end of the verse. The poor, the needy, right? These have some slight differences in them, but practically they are very similar, right? Some say poor is someone who doesn't have nisab, and needy is someone who doesn't have enough for their daily expenses, right? And some say vice versa. Those employed to administer zakat. This is in the case of when there is an Islamic government and they employ people to go collect zakat from people. Those people's wages could be paid from zakat funds. Those whose hearts need to be softened toward Islam, this one doesn't apply generally anymore. This was in the beginning days of Islam when zakat was given sometimes to non-Muslims, sometimes to new Muslims who weren't that firm in their faith, and they did not have support from their own communities because they accepted Islam. So this was given to them to help them stabilize themselves. In the time of Umar radiallahu anhu, all the Sahaba agreed that Islam has gained enough strength now that we don't need to give this to people. Right? So it was stopped from that point onwards, according to most scholars. It's not abrogated, it's not mansukh, right? Nasakh can't happen after Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam's time. But the illah, the cause that made this permissible, it ceased to exist. If it comes back, then we give it again. Right? There's nothing like that. But generally, this doesn't apply today. Those in slavery, so the slave, you can give a slave zakat, doesn't apply already today. Those in debt. Anyone who is in debt, you can give them zakat. They obviously don't have enough money to pay off their debt. You can give them zakat for that, right? And I mean, in debt, you got to look at is that person paying zakat? If they're paying zakat, you can't give them zakat no matter what, right? So their debt has to be such that it makes them ineligible to pay zakat. So if someone owes $5 million, they're in debt, you can't give them $5 million in zakat, right? You have to look at their zakat calculations. They can only deduct the next 12 months worth of payments towards their loan, right? After all of that, are they paying zakat? They might have to pay zakat, right? Yeah, mortgage, same thing, right? You just deduct any amount that they owe and they're going to pay in the next 12 months, capital only, not interest, right? If After that, because of that, they're not paying zakat now. Right? Let's say I have $5,000, but my next 12 months of payments or debt that I owe is $6,000. I'm in the minus. I'm not paying zakat. Right? So that type of person could receive zakat. That's what it means, those in debt. In the way of Allah, someone who is out in an expedition in an Islamic war or something like that, and there they don't have access to their wealth back home, they can receive zakat. And a destitute traveler, someone who is traveling and they don't have access to their wealth back home, they could receive zakat where they are to help them get back home. Very quickly, I won't go into detail. Many people misuse this one in the way of Allah because fi sabilillah, or for the sake of Allah, has become a very common term. They say that give zakat anywhere as long as for the sake of Allah, or it's going to serve the deen, right? So that is not the case. This is a specifically defined thing. Because of this, they use this as say you could give zakat to masjids, or for this project, for that project. It's fi sabilillah. No, that's not the case. Okay. Who can't receive zakat? Your parents, your children, direct ascendants, direct descendants, and husband and wife. They can't receive zakat. Okay, there's some difference of opinion about a wife giving her husband zakat, where you could, but generally everyone says that you can't, because you can't give zakat to somewhere where you're going to benefit from it. Right? So you can't give zakat to someone who spends on you, because you're going to benefit from it. Right? Let's say you live with your uncle, and your uncle pays for all your expenses. Normally, you could give zakat to your uncle if he's eligible. But if this is the case where he's spending on you, you can't give him your zakat. It's going to benefit you. Okay, same thing with the husband and wife. The husband spends on the wife. So if the wife gives the husband her zakat, he's going to spend it back on her. It's not permissible. And a question we get often over here is about tax receipts. You give zakat somewhere and they give you a tax receipt. Can you claim that? Yes, you could claim it, but you shouldn't keep that wealth that you get back. You should give that again as a donation. Okay, so you get double the reward. That's the benefit of that. And Sayyids, anyone from the lineage of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, they can't receive zakat. Masjid, Islamic institutes, public projects, orphanage, well, anything like that, zakat has to go into the ownership of an individual. Okay? When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala defined the 8 types, He mentioned 8 types of people. Zakat has to go into the ownership of an eligible person, individual. Okay? Masjids that take zakat, they can't use it for their expenses. They have to give it ahead to those in needs. Islamic institutes, my institute, Al-Ihsan, where we are, we take zakat funds, right? But we don't use it for our expenses. We give that zakat to those students who are eligible, and because of that, they're eligible, they're unable to pay their tuition, their fees for courses and programs. Right? So the zakat goes to them, and then they pay us their tuition through that. It has to be going to an individual. In the case of a water pump, a well, an orphanage, a hospital, zakat can only be given for that if that thing will be owned by people who are eligible. Okay, if it's an orphanage and all the orphans will own that building, then you could give zakat there because it's going to the ownership of an individual. That aspect must be there. You know, like in salat, you have rukuns, you have qiyam, you have sujood, and so on. Tamleek is the rukun of zakat. Transfer of wealth into the ownership of an individual. That is tamleek. Okay, so that is very important. That wealth is getting to a person. Where should you give your zakat? The primary instruction in Sharia is to give it locally. Okay, for those who are in need in your local communities, they should be given it first. Among those are your relatives. The relatives are the most deserving of your zakat of wealth, those who you're allowed to give to, like we talked about, right? If your relatives live somewhere else, they are still more deserving than other people in your local community. Okay, they have the most priority, relatives, wherever they may be. If you have relatives that are local, and those that are maybe overseas, then the local ones get preference. Okay, and then when there are, especially nowadays in the past few decades, there are always cases overseas, international, where there's causes, different things happening. Like we're now in Turkey and Syria, the earthquake happened, or giving money for places that are in need. Right, that is nothing absolutely wrong with that. Right, you can do that. It's good to do that. Basically, each person needs to decide on their own. See what the situation is in the world right now, in the local communities here and there, and their families, relatives. Where should my zakat wealth go? Where will it benefit people the most? Right? And if your zakat wealth is enough, right, it's not a very small amount, then diversify. Give some here, give some here, give some here. That is generally the best way to go. If you have zakat owing, some years you paid, some years you totally forgot to pay, then you gotta go back and do your best to see what you missed. Do your best to estimate. It's hard sometimes, but if a person just had a bank account with cash in it, right, or types of accounts where you can easily go back and track over the years how much you had on every specific date, then you go and find those dates and you pay zakat based on that, right? But if you can't find that out, then you do your best to estimate, and like we said, always do a bit more to be cautious, to be sure that you're not falling short in paying your zakat. If it's on a specific type of asset where you were paying zakat on all your other things, but one thing you didn't know that zakat was due on, then go back and again do your best to calculate and pay zakat on that. All right. One thing I didn't talk about is the collectibles. So if you collect items, right, it could be physical items, stamp collection, coin collection, NFTs now is a big thing. So it depends if you're what you're doing with them. If you're trading them short term, long term. Short term, within 1 year, we say you're gonna pay zakat on it, on the full amount, because that's your business merchandise now, right? If you're keeping it long term, one day the value may go up, I'm gonna sell it or something, then there's no zakat on it, unless it is a collection of gold and silver coins. Okay, gold and silver, in any case, zakat should be paid on that. Okay, so when you're missing something, you go back and see how much what you forgot, what you missed on, and you pay zakat on that. The summary of everything we've discussed, you need to see what your zakatable assets are. You should be able to distinguish what is not zakatable. If you don't know, then you ask. Minus from that your liabilities, money that you owe, overdue expenses, no future expenses. Okay, remember that. Minus that, what you're left with, you pay 2.5% of zakat on that. Now, I mentioned before National Zakat Foundation. I do work with them. I'm part of their Sharia Advisory Board, and one service that they provide for free, which is a very good one, I tell everyone about this, is one-on-one zakat consultations. If someone needs help determining how much zakat they have to pay, they have some specific questions about their specific situation, you can go on their website. There's a number of us that you can book under there, whatever time you like. You get a half-hour session. You can ask all your questions. So that's something that you can look into. It's usually done online through Microsoft Teams, but it could be through a phone as well. That's fine. You book a time and then it's done that way. One thing I want to mention just before we finish, I'm sure you guys have been hearing already during Jummah and different times. We have a conference coming up tomorrow, inshallah, in preparation for Ramadan. It's being hosted by Al Ihsan, Guildford. Alhamdulillah, we're happy to have them as one of the partners in this program, and it's taking place tomorrow at SFU. The Surrey campus. In the evening, we have about a dozen different partners with us on this and many speakers lined up. So those of you who have already registered, we'll see you there, inshallah. Those who have not, please do join us for this with your families. Everyone come down. Just register online on our website, and we would be very happy to see you there, inshallah, tomorrow evening. Right? And we'll end with any questions if there are. If not, then that would be the end of the workshop for zakat.